Hare Krishna. A very good afternoon to all of you gathered here, and also a very good afternoon to the online community of the Nehru Center in London. I welcome you warmly on behalf of ISKCON Bangalore, the very famous, popular Krishna temple in Bangalore, all the way in India. I'm happy to see so many of you join us for the book launch of Sing, Dance and Pray, authored by Shri Hindol Sengupta ji. This book is an inspirational story of Srila Prabhupada, the founder Acharya of ISKCON. Just for your information, for those of you offline, copies of the book Sing, Dance and Pray are available downstairs. So if you would like to get your copy today, you're most welcome to do so after the event. Today's event will conclude with a book signing by the author himself, Dr. Hindol Sengupta ji. Today's event will be about an hour long, just a very tiny, gentle reminder that all phones must be on silent mode during this event. On that note, Hare Krishna, and once again, a very warm welcome on behalf of ISKCON Bangalore to all of you for the first UK book launch of Sing, Dance and Pray in London here at the Nehru Center. I humbly invite all the dignitaries to kindly step forward to light the lamp and offer flowers, which are in the basket there, to Srila Prabhupada, the founder Acharya of ISKCON.
Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimade Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Nidhi Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare.
Thank you all so much. We will now watch a video introduction to the book Sing, Dance and Pray. I request you all to please direct your attention to the screen on stage.
At the advanced age of 69, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, crossed the oceans on a cargo ship to spread the message of Lord Krishna in the West. He founded ISKCON, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. In just over a decade, Hare Krishna became a household name. Beginning with New York in 1966, Srila Prabhupada built a global movement. His movement established more than 100 Krishna temples on 6 continents, introduced the Rath Yatra festival to the West, impressed the beatnik poet Allen Ginsberg, and found a follower in George Harrison of the Beatles. His followers represented a diversity of cultures, races, ethnicities, and nationalities. Srila Prabhupada's best-selling record of the Mahamantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, attracted followers all around the world and also inspired many other record-breaking albums. He established a publishing house for writing, printing, and distributing books on Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. This grew to be one of the world's largest publishers in history, selling tens of millions of copies on Bhakti Yoga, elucidating the science of self-realization. From America to Russia, Australia to Switzerland, Srila Prabhupada created a worldwide movement that has far outlived him. Yet his personal story remains undiscovered. Now, a spellbinding book is set to change that. Sing, Dance and Pray is a fascinating account of Srila Prabhupada's life story by Dr. Hindol Sengupta, India's multiple award-winning historian of religion. It brilliantly showcases Srila Prabhupada's sacred mission to spread Krishna consciousness in all the continents during the most turbulent times of world history. Published by Penguin Random House, this book is already taking the world of religious and cultural history by storm, with fulsome praise pouring in from many distinguished personalities.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.
Sing, Dance and Pray will enrich your life as you read about Srila Prabhupada's ardent devotion, absolute surrender, and untiring efforts to spread the message of Lord Krishna. Pick up a copy of Sing, Dance and Pray today and let the story of Srila Prabhupada and the grace of Sri Krishna fill your heart with joy. To make the whole world happy in Krishna consciousness was the mission of Srila Prabhupada.
Now, I invite the dignitaries to please come on stage. As they walk up, allow me to please introduce each of them to you. First, we have Shri Chanchalapathi Dasa ji. He's the Senior Vice President of ISKCON Bangalore and the Vice Chairman of the Akshaya Patra Foundation. Shri Chanchalapathi Dasa was an undergraduate student when he came across the teachings of Srila Prabhupada. These teachings definitely changed his life. We welcome you here and we're happy to have you. Next, we have Shri Amish Tripathi ji. Shri Amish ji is a diplomat and author. He first published his first book in 2010 and has written 10 books since. His books have sold 6.5 million copies and have been translated into 20 Indian and international languages. His Shiva trilogy is the fastest selling book series in Indian publishing history. His Ramchandra series is the second fastest published book series in the Indian subcontinent, which has also, of course, been distributed all across the world. Critics have said that his books are backed by tremendous research, deep thought, a rooted pride in India, and a liberal, progressive outlook. In his diplomatic role, Shri Amish Ji works as the Minister, Culture and Education at the Indian High Commission to the UK, and he is the Director of the Nehru Centre right here in London. Thank you so much for joining us. You may please sit down. And finally, the source of the inspirational book, Sing, Dance and Pray, we have with us Dr. Hindol Sengupta ji, the author of the book Sing, Dance and Pray. He is a multiple award-winning author of 10 books. He has been a Chevening Scholar at Oxford, a Knight Baggot Fellow at at Columbia University, and has a doctorate in international relations from the Geneva School of Diplomacy. He has been a World Economic Forum Young Global Leader. He is Chief Economic Research Officer at Invest India, the National Investment Promotion Agency of the Government of India. We're so happy to have all three of you here. A warm welcome. Hare Krishna, please take your seats. I now invite Shri Chanchalapathi Dasa to please present the temple honors of ISKCON Bangalore, all the way from the Radha Krishna Chandra Mandir in Bangalore to Shri Amish Ji.
This makes a good color. Hey.
Thank you. I now invite and request Shri Amish Tripathi ji to please launch the book Sing, Dance and Pray, the inspirational story of Srila Prabhupada, authored by Shri Hindol Sengupta and published by Penguin Random House India. Pardon me. You may open the ribbon. This is the first chapter. Oh, see.
Here, you can.
Okay, let's just slip it out.
Yeah, fair enough.
This is the first chapter of the UK book tour, book launch of Sing, Dance and Pray. We are so very honored to be doing this here at the Nehru Centre today. Thank you so much.
The Nehru Centre is honored that this book is being launched here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Without further ado, I now yield the floor to our distinguished guests and speakers. I request you to kindly have a small book discussion to whet our appetites, not just about the book, but also hopefully open a window to the inspirational life of Srila Prabhupada, which I hope will also help us open our hearts to him.
If I may begin, to all those watching at home and the physical audiences here. Of course, I'd come with a copy of the book since I had received it early and I read through it. When Swami Chanchalapathi ji and Hindol and I, when we were speaking about how we should structure this conversation, among the things that struck us is that ISKCON and Lord Krishna represents best the bhakti path that exists in dharma. And the entire, among the key principal components of following the bhakti path is that we follow our heart. That you can have things which apparently look unstructured, but actually lead to a wonderful destination at the end of it, as compared to one person saying you have to actually go this way. So we thought actually that we will have an unstructured discussion, exploring our views on how the ISKCON movement has impacted us, what we have seen of it, and through that, hopefully, through sharing those insights, share with all of you why this is a path that inspires so deeply. So, Swamiji, with your permission, if I may make a few observations that that come from me on this. One is, of course, on the book, and Hindol, as you know, as we all know, is a brilliant author. I've been a fan of the works that he has put, particularly his book on Sardar Patel as well. But on this, on Swami Prabhupada, I think the thing that struck me most, because I have always lived with the legacy that Srila Prabhupada has left behind with ISKCON. I've always engaged with that, but one knew very little about Swamiji himself, very little about what was his life like before he left this great legacy, which has impacted all of us so deeply. I have interacted with ISKCON for many years actually. So as you know, I spent much of my early life in Mumbai. There's a lovely ISKCON temple in Juhu. Those of you who are in Mumbai, I'm sure you're aware of it. Those of who you aren't, please go to the wonderful ISKCON temple at Juhu. And I used to go out there. And of course, the prasadam was always brilliant. But just sitting at that temple gave me peace. And that was my first introduction to ISKCON. I've seen temples across, in Bangalore, and including out here. There's an ISKCON temple very close by. One of the neighbors of the Nehru Center is a very big industrialist, but he himself is a lifelong Lord Krishna devotee and an ISKCON supporter. So he took me first to the ISKCON temple out here, and at that temple once again I got that same feeling of calmness and peace. One just felt like just sitting down against the wall, right, and just being there. And this is something that strikes me at every ISKCON temple, including many of the new temples that are coming up. That's one thing that truly excites me at Mayapur, at Vrindavan, because we need to revive many of those ancient arts. But if visiting all these temples, if I get peace at every single one of the ISKCON temples, then there's a line which strikes me कि जिसकी रचना इतनी सुंदर है वो खुद कितना सुंदर होगा. If Swami Prabhupada has created an institution which after so many years still gives peace to people who go and pray and spend time out there, what must be the beauty of his own life? And that's what we get to discover in this wonderful book. I yield the floor to you, Swamiji, to give us much more insights, and then of course Hindol, and then we will continue having a conversation. Sorry, Swamiji.
Very interesting observation, Amish. Yes, in fact, Srila Prabhupada's life is a vivid demonstration of his deep faith, devotion, and scholarship. Srila Prabhupada's name, I just want to comment on that. You mentioned about devotion. Prabhupada also said that devotion should be founded on authoritative scriptural understanding, philosophical basis, rational thought. The rational thought and the philosophy in our Vedic culture reaches its summit in the Vedanta. You see, that's why it is called Vedanta.
Yeah.
Veda meaning knowledge, Anta meaning the ultimate or the end of all knowledge. And Bhakti is the devotional love of God, part of it. And Srila Prabhupada was given this title, Bhakti Vedanta Swami, because he embodied that kind of a scholarship in his understanding and in his writing, and at the same time deeply immersed and dedicated and devoted to Krishna. So there was a very unique combination of Vedanta and Bhakti, and that was recognized by the scholarly and devotee community of Vrindavan in the 60s, 50s and 60s, and he was given this title as the Bhakti Vedanta. Swami. And in fact, this very much is in line with what Krishna teaches in the Bhagavad Gita. Aham sarvasya prabhavo mattha sarvam pravartate iti matva bhajante mam buddha bhava samanvitaha. And what is the source of everything in the world? And Krishna is saying, Aham sarvasya prabhavaha mattha sarvam pravartate. I'm the source of everything and everything is coming from me. Iti matva, those who have understood this, those who have realized this iti matva bhajante mam, they render service unto me, and they are Buddha, they are the enlightened ones, and bhava samanvitaha, and their hearts are filled with bhava, devotion. And so this verse in the Bhagavad Gita, or Krishna is saying that this is the ultimate of the understanding, knowing what is the source of everything, and one who has realized that their hearts are filled with love of God. And Srila Prabhupada was an embodiment of that one, and that's how his very name, Bhaktivedanta Swami.
Yeah, no, and this is one of the things that is rare, because you don't find normally Gyan Yoga and Bhakti Yoga in the same place.
Isn't it?
And it is so rare.
Right.
And that's what makes
Right.
Srila
I just want to
Prabhupada
add
so
one
much
more,
special.
one more comment. Prabhupada said, if there is devotion without philosophy, it's sentimental. And if there is philosophy without devotion, it is just speculation.
Correct.
And those kind of things. So you need both of these two things. And that's what Srila Prabhupada's own life was.
And knowledge without love can lead to Ravan and ego.
Isn't it?
Very dangerous.
This is very dangerous. Even now we see that in the world.
Sorry.
No, Srila Prabhupada is a very, very interesting and unique character in Indian history, right? In global Hinduism, which is a process that in many ways became mainstream with Swami Vivekananda, there have been many after that who have, taken the path of spreading Hinduism around the world. But if you look at the sheer footprint of Srila Prabhupada, the sheer scale at which he was able to spread the message of Shri Krishna, and he was able to do this, of course, in the last decade of his life. All of this comes together in a very unique story. And I was thinking about this, I went before our event, Amish, and I want to thank you once again. Amish has always been a very dear friend, and I'm always very happy. I used to come to Nehru Center for my book events before Amish became the director, but I just want to say that it's become even more special after you took over, and there's the real sense of purpose that you've given the center. Thank you very much. Thank you for your friendship and your kindness. But I went to the temple that you alluded to, Amish, and I had that wonderful food that ISKCON is so famous for. And I was thinking to myself, you mentioned foreigners accepting this, and when I went today, they were dancing and singing. They were singing, dancing, and praying in a sense outside the temple. And I thought to myself that, look, this is Soho, right? It's the heart of central London. And imagine, when, I thought to myself, Srila Prabhupada would have walked these pathways, in the 60s and 70s. And he would have landed in a very different London, a London in a sense, as I write in my book, really grappling with very serious issues of society, of race, and so on and so forth. Exactly the same thing he would have seen in America. And in all of that, Srila Prabhupada's ability to transcend, not just transcend, I'm going to make 2 points here. In one sense, he transcended those events to place his message above them, to say that there is something bigger than the politics of the world. But he also used those events to teach people the lesson that, the more these things poison your heart, the more you will be miserable in the world, right? And there is a greater source of happiness than all of these things that embroil human beings, right? And in a sense, he was such a great messenger. He was such a great messenger, not only for Krishna consciousness, which is, of course, was the living truth of his life, but also for Indian culture in general. You know, I say in many of my talks about this book that Srila Prabhupada taught his early disciples literally how to eat, how to cook, how to, put an incense stick, an agarbatti at the altar, how to light a lamp. The minutest thing was taught in terms of culture by Srila Prabhupada as a blessing to his initial devotees, right? And indeed to all the people who gathered around him. So he was not just a messenger of spirituality, which of course he was a monk, but he was also somebody who brought alive, in social sciences, we say lived experience, the lived experience of what it means to have Indian culture in your life. What happens when you eat freshly cooked vegetarian food? What happens when you wash your hands before you eat it, right? What happens when you, even if you cannot practice celibacy, in a sense, bring that peace in your heart to commit yourself to a partner for life? All these things that Srila Prabhupada sat down with his young devotees in America, in England, other parts, and taught them. I mean, think about it. Here's this man who's really at the last phase of his life, who's spending all his nights diligently translating, because he only slept for 2 or 3 hours, diligently translating and writing book after book, taking time off from his spiritual practice and institution building to teach people the minutiae of Indian culture. So it's not that it's the grand temples, and of course, if you talk about ISKCON, you cannot miss the magnificent temples they've built around the world, but also the minutiae of Indian culture. For all of us who talk about Indian culture today around the world, what a great example, what a great lived experience of Srila Prabhupada on how to bring the blessing of Indian culture into each individual life. I think this is an incredible blessing and an incredible lesson from Srila Prabhupada's life.
And building on that, Swamiji, with your permission, there are some more things that strike me, Hindol, very, very valid points. One is that Srila Prabhupada began this part of his journey at age 69. So many of us say, oh, we've grown so old, we don't have the energy, my joints are hurting, my brain is tired, I have this, I have that. If you see the pictures of Srila Prabhupada, the Tej that's on his face, it's one of those Sanskrit untranslatables. I don't know how to translate Tej. It's just a radiance. Actually, even that doesn't capture it, but the radiance on his face, So it shows that actually that's available for all of us, no matter what age you're at. If you have a mission and you're committed to it. The second thing that strikes me is in an age today when there are so many divisions of race, of gender, so many issues, the fact that he showed that it didn't matter where you were born, right? His followers were from every community, and they all found common comfort and a sense of purpose. There's one of the things I read, I think Srila Prabhupada himself said that there's a beauty in simple rituals also. Of course, one has to, follow the Vedas and the knowledge, but simple rituals that you do together, that's what builds that oneness. And at a time of bigotry, hatred, I think this is a very, very important message, that we can grow beyond where we were born. Right? And a third thing that strikes me is, an institution, and of course, Swamiji, Hindol, you'd be aware of that, the Akshay Patra, which began in India. Many Indians in India wouldn't know this. Many Indians in the UK also wouldn't know this. Akshay Patra does noble work in the UK. There's, sadly, because of, the cost of living crisis, many parts, there is serious, food poverty in a way for many youngsters in the UK, many communities in the UK. And Akshay Patra is doing wonderful service in the UK, and in a way carrying on, Srila Prabhupada's message, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the world is one family. We may be born at different places, but it's our duty to help as many as we can. If we've been lucky to be blessed, then our duty is to pass on that blessing, not to hoard it. And see a good bank account and be delighted with that. Our duty is to pass it forward.
Yeah, very interesting observation, Amish, what you made about Srila Prabhupada. Did all of this from the age of 69.
Yeah.
And he lived in till about 81. So those 11 years, 12 years. And as Hindol also mentioned, Prabhupada came alone from India, and he represented a very ancient tradition, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And Prabhupada traces that back all the way to Krishna himself. And another interesting thing about Srila Prabhupada was that he came alone and he inspired the people of the West. And in America, in England, in Europe, in Australia, and they were the ones who actually helped him to build this worldwide movement. Prabhupada grew up in India, in Calcutta. That was his first meeting with his guru, who told him to take this knowledge of Krishna Bhakti all over the world, was in Calcutta in the year 1922. So we were still under the British rule. And Srila Prabhupada himself was part of the, he studied in Scottish Church College in Calcutta. And he went to the college, he got he passed his exams, he completed the coursework, and he did not take the degree because at that time Gandhiji had given a call that we should reject everything that is foreign, the Swadeshi movement. So he did not accept the degree. So that was his fervor for the freedom movement. And then he saw 22, and then 47, we got our independence. And then he was still building his business. He had a family. He was trying to spread the message of Krishna. And so he was very much aware of the British rule, and he was English educated. And so when he went to New York and started the ISKCON, at the back of his mind, there was always London. Because, Indians were strongly influenced by London and what was happening here and the rule from here. And Srila Prabhupada although he established the temple in New York and the second temple was in San Francisco, he was always thinking of London. And he was alone. And he didn't have much resources. He didn't have anybody from India supporting him. So he inspires 3 couples, all 3 of them Americans. And there were couples, married people, not sannyasis who were trained in spirituality for 36 years. None of those. They were young Americans and they were just married. And one of them had a small baby.
Wow.
So these 3 couples with the baby come to London, inspired by Srila Prabhupada. And those days, the telephone was very expensive.
Right.
Prabhupada communicated through letters. And they would write to him. He was in America. And Srila Prabhupada would write back. And when they came here, those 3 couples, they also did not have money. They also did not have any big contacts. And the kind of struggle they went through with a small baby with them.
I can imagine.
And it is said that they were not having a place to stay. And finally, somebody helped them to stay in a book warehouse, a book go down.
Okay.
And they allowed them to stay. This is 69. And it was not meant for residents. He said, the owner said, okay, you can somehow, if you can manage. And there was no heating and there was no hot water. And they stayed there in such a warehouse of having old books and unsold magazines and such things. And they were living there. and the mother and the baby, they were living out in a cardboard box, cardboard carton. This is the kind of sacrifice Americans are making for spreading Krishna Bhakti under the inspiration of Srila Prabhupada. This is the kind of deep devotion, sacrifice, inspiration, and Srila Prabhupada could bring about even in people. And these are some of the wonderful things, and all their lives they were devoted to Krishna, and they are still devoted to Krishna, these three families, these three couples. And so, this is the kind of an impact,
That
what
he
you were
left.
saying, the impact on individuals that Prabhupada could bring about. And they were all from all kinds of ethnicities and races and nationalities. And Prabhupada could impress on them about devotion to Krishna.
No, and this is why I find this book so special, because you get deeper into understanding what gave rise to this. What are the things that you discover? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, just a couple of things that, if you look at India's, His Grace mentioned the fact that Srila Prabhupada never took his degree. Now, Scottish Church was mentioned. Now, remember, Srila Prabhupada was a contemporary of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. You see, people forget these connections and the years. In the national movement, you see, the revolutionary movement, and of course, some of our friends have written recently about the revolutionary movement. But if you look at the revolutionary movement of India, its entire history, the contemporary revolutionary movement, three major spiritual characters come out of that. In the early phase, Vivekananda dies quite quickly. Then there is Srila Prabhupada, who actually, I would say, is the great sweep of transition. He sees the early part, he sees independence, he sees post-independence, he sees the first signs of India going, around the world. He sees, the Nehruvian movement and all of that, right? And of course, the third is Aurobindo.
Right.
Three great sort of spiritual ideas that come from that period. But Srila Prabhupada is very significant because, Vivekananda, of course, dies early. Aurobindo goes off to Pondicherry and creates his own sort of international community. And it's in a sort of sense cuts away. For the last decade of his life, Aurobindo barely spoke, barely met anybody, right? Srila Prabhupada is very interesting because till the last day, he was engaging with the world while remaining in the world. He was never cutting himself away, right? He was traveling incessantly. One of my most favorite photographs of Srila Prabhupada while writing this book is, you will notice, and I said this to His Grace once, and I wrote in the book also, you will often see in many photographs of Srila Prabhupada, even when he's talking to people, he's looking up a little bit. His gaze is, and he has that very, what we would call a very aristocratic face. He has that aristocratic nose, and, in Bengalis, you look at his face and you know that he comes from high pedigree and all of that, right? But he's always sort of slightly looking up. I was looking at a video of his where somebody is asking him, what he thinks of this and that. And, in a true Bengali aristocratic fashion, beyond a point of people are saying silly things to him, Srila Prabhupada also dismisses them, right? But you see, when you look at him, you realize, and I actually really felt that even though he's in the world, of course, his gaze is always at God. His gaze never shifts away from God. And though he's very in the world, if you look at his, and a voluminous writer, so he jots down everything, including his problems. Somebody's not giving him land. Somebody's trying to steal money from his movement. Somebody's stopping something else somewhere. Then in New York, some court cases filed, this, that, and the other. It's constantly going on. And yet his gaze, in a sense, is always at the divine. I think that's a great and inspirational message on how this man at the end of his, last decade of his life was so embroiled in the world and yet always remained above it, so to speak. So that's an incredible sort of spiritual message. His more historical message, I think, is his life, really shows us the transition. It shows us India before independence. Srila Prabhupada, people don't realize, and I wrote this in the book, Srila Prabhupada actually, saw the bombing of Calcutta.
Yeah, correct.
Right? So he actually saw Gandhiji and his, the desire to, and his sort of Gandhiji's message to throw, all the foreign goods into the fire, and that's why he doesn't take, this degree. Srila Prabhupada writes a letter to Gandhiji, saying that all that you're doing is all very well, but there is a deeper message to be conveyed. And Srila Prabhupada writes letters to many of India's top leaders, and each of those letters are worth noticing. See, today, Amish, in this moment, people like you and me and many of us, talk about how India should, just before this event, we were talking about this, how India should regain its civilizational ideas and propagate it, not just regain it. But who are the people who said these things before anybody else? If you read those letters of Srila Prabhupada, what is he telling these leaders? What is he telling India's prime ministers? He's saying, in today's words, if you were to sort of translate, he's saying it's all very well to build dams and roads. All of this is fine. There's no problem with it. But if India loses its spiritual soul and its devotion to the divine, which is the raison d'etre of Indian civilization, then there is no point. Then society will collapse. And, you will agree, that's exactly what happened in India. We brought in this kind of modernism and that kind of modernism and all of that. But our society, something happened to our society, right? Srila Prabhupada was prescient in pointing this out to India's prime ministers and its leaders, that all of the things that you're doing, democracy, there's that, all of that, modernization, it's all great. But if you lose its innate spirituality and civilizational ethos, then none of this will account for anything. And society will become corrupt and poisoned, which is exactly what happened. Every word that Srila Prabhupada wrote in those letters to India's leaders came true.
No, very true. There are two things that strike me from your, inputs, Hindol. And Swamiji would, of course, I'd love to hear his thoughts on this. But two things. One, we've had this tradition in India of those who are close to moksha, who become realized souls. And then, as a part of that, they cut off from society. Many of them, go to the Himalayas or, but essentially they are by themselves. And Sri Aurobindo probably went in that direction. And there's another approach, that someone who becomes a Siddhi, who's become a realized soul, but still engages with the world. And in a way, like a lotus, that because the world is messy. And your fear in always engaging with a messy world is that you'll also become messed up. Correct. So this is a very critical role that some of the Siddhis play, some of the realized soul, that they don't cut off. They continue to engage with the world and try and make it a better place, which is what Srila Prabhupada chose to do, which makes him that much more consequential for the world. And yes, and one thing that strikes me, I'm a diplomat, so I shouldn't name those societies, but there are societies where you find there's just a blind pursuit of economic growth, and I'm certainly not, I'm not suggesting we all become socialists and become poor. No, the economic growth is important, but a blind pursuit of that at the cost of what your society is supposed to be, at the cost of who you are, at the cost of the asabya of your society, the long term destroys everything. Money is not worth anything if you don't have things which are worth more than money. And you find that happening. It had started happening in our society as well. Fortunately, in India, there is a bit of a revival. And in the West, one sees a hankering for this because there's a sense that they're losing too much. And Swamiji, have you worked with ISKCON in the West as well? And what have you
Yeah, I have
seen of this?
traveled around the world to ISKCON temples and seen how things are happening. Yes, I would think, what Srila Prabhupada connected with all over the world was he saw that there are genuine seekers everywhere, in every society, in every culture, in every nation in the world. And he wanted to appeal to them. He wanted to reach out this very, India's very genuine, very pure spiritual message. He wanted to reach that to those who are sincerely seeking. Prabhupada had about 5,000 disciples, and you should hear some of their, practically all of their stories. Although they were in America, in South America, in Australia, wherever, whichever part, just before they came in touch with Prabhupada and ISKCON, they were deeply seeking. They were sincerely seeking. There's one story of one devotee. He was working for the Hollywood, the movies, and then he was involved in, and then they had gone as a crew for shooting somewhere in some part of the world, and it was in the forest, and they had tents. And so one night he came out, and then he was looking at the stars, and he was somehow not able to sleep, and then he was thinking, what's going on in this world? Who is in control? What is the purpose of all these things? These come some of these very deep thoughts. And within a month, he came in touch with Srila Prabhupada's book, and he visited an ISKCON temple, and he became a monk there. So all of them were genuine seekers, and Srila Prabhupada was trying to reach out to them. And you mentioned about, Hindol mentioned about going to the leaders of the country. And today we are in Nehru Center. And I must recall this. Prabhupada wrote a letter to Jawaharlal Nehru in the 1950s, early 50s or late 40s or so. In that letter, Prabhupada writes, he says that there is something very significant, very fundamental, very universal principle that our Vedic literatures are presenting. And that should be shared with everyone, because this is universal. It's going to benefit everyone. It's going to enrich everyone's life. And so this has to reach everyone. And he gives an example. Just like Socrates developed the method of analytical and critical thinking, and that has influenced every branch of humanity today, and it has benefited the whole world.
True.
And if Socratic method of questioning and thinking and critical analysis was just confined to Athens, it would have been such a loss to the humanity. In the same way, there is something very fundamental, universal, and beneficial to everyone in the world, which is in the message of the Vedic literatures. And that I want to reach to everyone in the world. This is what he wrote in a letter to Jawaharlal Nehru. And
I will not ask about the reply. No.
Very unfortunately, I'll share with you. Prabhupada was not known at that time. He was some obscure sadhu from Vrindavan who is writing a letter. And I don't think Jawaharlal Nehru read the letter, probably wouldn't have read.
That's unfortunate.
And Prabhupada wrote to Gandhiji, probably he did not read. And so Prabhupada was appealing to different people. When all such appeals to leaders and different kinds of people in India failed, because as Hindol said, we were trying to blindly ape the West and run after economic development. Not that as you said, economic development is irrelevant. It is absolutely important. We can't have poverty. And I'll talk about that one also in the context of Akshay Patra. So Prabhupada did not get a reply from any of them. And then he finally wanted to make one final attempt. He was not sure what's going to happen. He was starting from India at the age of 69. There was no support for him. He was carrying with him 40 rupees, which cannot be converted into dollars in America those days. And so it was practically, he was penniless when he was coming to America.
And he went on a cargo ship.
He went on a cargo ship, 35 days of orders journey. And while on board the ship, he has a heart attack. and there is no doctor, there is no medical support. And 2 nights later, he has a second heart attack, survives these 2 heart attacks, and comes to America. These were the kind of circumstances. Another very touching thing that when I reflect on this, when Prabhupada's ship reaches New York harbor, and he goes through the immigration process, and then he's about to step down the ship, and then he realizes that he has got 40 rupees with him, which cannot be converted, and so he has no money at all. And when we come from India, of course, all of us have made our first maiden journey from India to America, how we made sure we have $500, this one is there, that kind. We would not have made sure all these things were there. So Prabhupada, this was in 1966, he was about to step down from the cargo ship, and he realized he has no money at all, not a single dollar. And Prabhupada, if you see his life, he came from a middle-class family, but he did well. His businesses were doing well. In the 1930s, Prabhupada had 2 Buick cars.
Wow. In
those days. So you can imagine. So he came from a good family.
He was under 40 at that time.
He was under 40. So, there was no, all the necessities were there. That's how it was. And now he has come to do Krishna's work, carrying the greatest message of Bharat, not supported by anyone. And he's about to step off the ship, and he's not having a single dollar with him.
But he had Lord Krishna.
He had Lord Krishna. That was the most, Prabhupada says, you got it. He had Krishna, and he had faith in the holy name of Krishna. And he said, this was the only asset I had. And so he goes to the captain of the ship. He was an Indian gentleman, Captain Pandya. And he goes to him and says that I'm about to step out of the ship, and I realize I don't have any money. And I have got these books. He was carrying with him the Prathama Skandha of the Bhagavat, the first canto of the Bhagavat. He had translated from Sanskrit to English, and with great difficulty, he had published them into 3 volumes, and he was carrying trunks of them in the ship. So he said, I have these books, and if you can take these books and give me some money, and that'll help me. So Captain Pandya asks him, what is the cost of the book? And Prabhupada is thinking. He's now making up the MRP for the book at that moment. And he says $5 per book. And so Captain Pandya smiles and says, Swamiji, don't worry. Please give me the 3 books. And he gives him $25. And so with that $25, he steps off the ship. And that's how he built the worldwide movement, the International Society for Krishna. So this was the kind of a thing that Srila Prabhupada and Hindol, you were saying that, and you mentioned too, that Prabhupada did not withdraw himself, although he was in that height of spirituality. Prabhupada said there are 2 kinds of spiritualists in our Vedic culture. Some of them are called Bhajananandi. And they are the ones who go into seclusion, and they want to do their solitary bhajan, and they are blissful in that. There's another kind of spiritually advanced souls, and they are known as Goshtyanandi. And they want to go out and reach this message to more and more people. And when they see that other people are influenced and are benefited by this, they become joyous, and they are Goshtyanandi. And Prabhupada said that those who are Goshtyanandi, they are very, very special. And they make more sacrifice to reach out this message to people. And that's the kind of a thing. And Srila Prabhupada, in his last days, for about nearly 6 months, Prabhupada was not eating. He was living his last few months in Vrindavan. And he would just take Charanamrit from the lotus feet of Krishna. And he lived on that for the last many, many months. And he would be on his bed. And they would hold a dictaphone to him, and they would read. He had one of his disciples who would read from the Bhagavatam, and he was translating and giving dictation of the commentary of verse by verse. And on November 14th, 1977, in the morning, he spent a few hours translating the Bhagavatam. And that same evening at 7:30 p.m., he leaves this world. So up to his last day, he was working, translating, reaching the message to people. So this is the kind of a life Srila Prabhupada.
Fascinating. How are we doing for time?
Sorry. I just want to make one last point, if I may, before we go into Q&A.
Please do. Hindol.
You know, many people don't realize, even people who know about Srila Prabhupada and ISKCON don't sometimes realize that everything Srila Prabhupada said and did, he himself said, as Swamiji is saying again and again, came from a long, illustrious lineage. You see the men and women dancing in Soho today should know that they are essentially fulfilling a vision Shri Chaitanya in all those hundreds of years ago said in Bengal, that the name of Shri Krishna will be sung and uttered in every town and city around the world. You know, we talk about parampara in the Indian tradition, so to speak, right? This parampara is a long parampara, and Srila Prabhupada's, his own guru had tried to do, had begun the first efforts to, go international with the message, so to speak. And because Srila Prabhupada, a Scottish church student, spoke, perfect English and wrote beautifully in English, he had been given the task to fulfill this destiny. But the idea that the name of Shri Krishna would go to every, village, town and hamlet around the world is not their idea. It comes all the way from Shri Chaitanya. Very sadly, even in Bengal, Shri Chaitanya has been forgotten today. But in a sense, the men and women dancing outside Soho today are, in a sense, recalling that message of Shri Chaitanya. One of the things perhaps is important to remember, we talk about 5,000, maybe 10,000 years of Indian history. That history we sometimes should reiterate how it all connects together. That these great figures that we talk about, they were not in isolation. It's not like they suddenly came from somewhere and then disappeared. They come from this great, illustrious, rich tradition of Bharat. Yeah. So I thought perhaps that's something
Very
to...
true. Very true. Very true.
Yes, sorry.
Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Check. Thank you so much for this most amazing, inspiring discussion. Resistance appears in many forms. And I think what we've just heard from this conversation is how Srila Prabhupada very single-mindedly overcame every single form of resistance that was offered to him in his attempt to spread the message of Lord Shri Krishna. Thank you so much for sharing all that you did. We do have a few minutes. We do have a few minutes for a brief Q&A. So if there is anyone in the audience that has a question, now is a good time for you to take this mic. I think I can pass this. We can pass this around.
Or if there's anyone asking online.
Online.
Oh, right.
That also. But sorry.
If we have anyone online asking questions, we have our dignitaries here who would be happy to answer any such queries. Yes, there's someone
there
at the back.
Hi, thanks for the session. It's quite insightful. Just had a quick question. When do you think the seed was sown in Prabhupada that, okay, I want to get into this path, and, the seed sown moment? So can you throw some light on when was the initial seed was sown within him to start this mission or get onto this journey? Thank you.
Sorry, please.
Actually, as we were discussing, Srila Prabhupada had finished his degree in Calcutta from Scottish Church College. And there was a good family acquaintance who was having a pharmaceutical business, and they had offered him a job. And so he had a job in Calcutta. And he was married. This was the context. This happened in 1922, when he had a friend of his, and his friend urged him, I want you to come and meet a sadhu that I have come across. And Prabhupada, at that time, he was known as Abhay Charan Dey. And Abhay said, no, I don't want to meet any sadhus. My father was a very religious man, and anyone who looked like a sadhu, he would invite them and feed them and give them money and donations. I've seen these sadhus from close quarters, and I don't have much respect for them. That was the kind of a mindset Abhay had. But this friend of his practically drags him one day when they were taking a walk on Ultadanga Street in Calcutta, and takes him up to the monastery, the mutt which was there, and they go up to the terrace, and there they meet this sadhu who was sitting very erect, with his back erect, and he had a big book in front of him, and there was a small gathering of people, and he was talking to them, and he saw these two young men, Abhay and his friend, walk into this audience. And as part of Indian culture, they say that when they saw the sadhu, they paid their respects, and they were just rising to sit when the sadhu interrupted his talk, looked at them and said, young men like you should take the message of Krishna Bhakti all over the world. Abhay was startled. He hardly knows me, and he's telling me what I should do with the rest of my life. And so he just anyway patiently sat there. And the sadhu continued to speak. He would speak in English. He would quote some verses from Sanskrit texts, and he would speak in Bengali. This went on for a while, and at the end of it, the sadhu asked, do you have any questions? And Abhay raised his hand and said, today we are under the British rule. We want to have freedom. That's the most important thing in the world, in our country today. And who is going to listen to your message of Krishna when we are under foreign subjugation? So this is the most important thing. This is the kind of a conversation. So the sadhu replied that no, these kind of regimes and dynasties come and go in the history of humanity. The message of Krishna from the Bhagavad Gita, from the Vedic literatures, is so important, and it is going to benefit everyone in the world, and this cannot wait for any change of dynasties and regimes and all of these things. This is very urgent. This is addressing the fundamental problems of humanity, like birth, death, old age, and disease. You may have any amount of prosperity, economic prosperity. You're going to have these problems. And the message of Krishna, the Bhagavad Gita, has solution to these fundamental. This is the kind of a conversation that happened. And that was the turning point in Srila Prabhupada's life. And he came out of that conversation, of that meeting, and he said, this sadhu is very special. His friend asked him, what do you think of this sadhu? This sadhu is very special. And that sadhu was Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakura, who became his spiritual master, and who later on, once again, reiterated his direction to him that he should take the message of Krishna all over the world. And that's how the turning point happened.
Wonderful.
And Hindol captures all of that very nicely in the book.
Wonderful book. Geography matters. This Ulta Danga, His Grace was saying, I lived in Salt Lake in Calcutta for a long time, very close to Ulta Danga. But in my very early part of my childhood, when I was really, really young, we lived, and this is the first conversation I had with His Grace when I first spoke to him. We actually used to live in a house whose boundary wall was shared with the ISKCON temple.
Wow.
So I have great memories, childhood memories of ISKCON monks.
There's somebody wants to have.
Shall we take just one more question?
I guess that'll be the last one.
Yeah, this would be the last.
Hare Krishna, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. I love the title of the book, Sing, Dance, and Pray. I'd like to know what inspired you to name the book Sing, Dance, and Pray. Very often when I share Krishna consciousness with everyone, I always say we sing, dance, and feast. so, so I like to share this one now that we will sing, dance, and pray. It for me personally, I think it's excellent because everyone thinks Krishna consciousness is only about prasadam. So it's a good one, sing, dance, and pray. But I like to know what inspired you to name it that.
To name the book, Sing, Dance, and
Name
Pray.
the book. Well, actually,
Good question. Good question.
So, Sing, Dance, and Feast, let me just answer that. I think it's a great name. We should write a book about the food of Krishna consciousness, a book called Sing, Dance, and Feast. You've given us an idea. If we ever write it, we will credit you for having given us this idea.
Second print run of this.
Second print run of this. But Sing, Dance, and Pray, I think often, when you talk about devotion, people talk in serious terms, as they should. It's a serious thing, and people should talk about it in serious ways. But I really believe in Indian culture, bhakti is not just seriousness; it's also celebration. Celebration is such a part of our devotional practice, and the sobriety of our devotional practice, in a sense. When colonial rule came to India, many of the celebratory parts of our devotional processes were seen as exotic. They were seen as oriental. They were seen as not part of dignified, serious spiritual practice, which is absolutely not true. Our practices are as unique, in fact, far more potent, because they embrace all human emotions, not just one. We see the entire universe in our divine and our spiritual practices, right? So therefore, when we wanted to name a book, I asked His Grace, perhaps we should, instead of naming it something serious, which we could have, we should call it Sing, Dance, and Pray. And His Grace mentioned Abhay Charan. So funny, so many funny things have happened, interesting things. Once I finished writing this book, so many people asked me, oh yeah, I've gone to ISKCON, and they always say AC. One person even said, I always used to think when I was a boy that the temples must be air conditioned. That's why they say AC. Because, as a boy, I went to many temples which were not AC, so I thought this must be AC temple. So many people, even today, interestingly, don't realize AC stands for Abhay Charan, of a pre-monastic name of Srila Prabhupada. But I would perhaps, may I request His Grace to comment a little bit about Sing, Dance, and Pray and why it was apt.
And when Hindol mentioned to me that this is the title of the book, we discussed that internally in ISKCON Bangalore, and we found that this was absolutely the right, capturing the real mood of Srila Prabhupada and his mission. And so we fully endorsed, and we said that yes, it is Sing, Dance, and Pray. And of course, there is more to it. Srila Prabhupada said, singing, dancing, philosophizing, and feasting. This is the world of Hare Krishna.
And it's really true. I have actually met this young monk who's in the Noida Center. His Grace, of course, was him, Shama Kishore Prabhuji, who comes to my house very often. Very nice, much younger than me. Wonderful young monk. I asked him one day, how did you come to join the movement? He said, I was a student and I love dancing. And one day I went to this temple and I saw everybody's dancing. So I said, this is very cool. I must be part of this. People are doing good things and dancing all the time. So he actually said that was the beginning of my journey towards Krishna consciousness.
That is a lesson. Everyone assumes that religious people are boring. Religious people can be cool as well. We can be philosophical and cool. I worship Lord Shiva. You know how he is too. Completely cool.
But very true.
Thank you so much for all your lovely questions and for the wonderful answers that our panelists have given us. It's always the last few minutes of every discussion when there's a very tight deadline on time that the magic slips in. So thank you so much. On that note, we now come to the end of this event. On behalf of ISKCON Bangalore, we deeply thank the High Commission of India and the Nehru Center and of course Shri Amish Tripathi ji for this wonderful opportunity to bring Sing, Dance and Pray to the UK. Special thanks to also Srimati Archana, the program assistant, for your tireless efforts to help us here. Thank you to the volunteers, monks and staff of Nehru Center, monks of ISKCON Bangalore. And with that, we come to the end to say a big thank you to our wonderful audience today. It's been lovely to host you here this afternoon. We can actually go downstairs now. Our author will
Amish ji
be...
wants to say a couple of words.
Oh, sure.
I
Sorry.
just thought we should thank Swamiji as well, and of course His Grace and Hindol for this wonderful program and for giving Nehru Center the honor of being able to host this. Thank you. That's all
Most
that I want.
welcome.
Thank you.
And we
Thank
should
you
also
so
thank
much.
Akshay Patra UK
Yes.
for who have brought the feast from
Yes.
from Akshay
Yes,
Patra
indeed.
kitchen.
That's exactly what my next point is, which is the books, if you want to purchase them, are available downstairs. And you can also get your copy signed by Shri Hindol Sengupta ji. And soon after that, we will have sumptuous prasadam to refresh your soul. So
Nice.
on that note, thank you so much once again. Hare Krishna and
Hare
good
Krishna.
afternoon.